Hey, how you doing? I thought over a beer today we'd talk about how I ended up on a carrier and once I got done with these schools. Yeah, a long journey. So, like I was saying, I was in boot camp in Orlando, Florida. Got out of there 8 weeks later, and that's when I started schooling. And the first step of that was basic electricity and electronics. That was before A school, which was to become an electronics technician. So Florida was nice. Like I said, it was in the summertime when I went through boot camp. So it was just at the end of summer in Florida when I was starting basic electricity schooling. So the way it was laid out was it was almost like a dorm room, sort of, the barracks there in Orlando. 4 guys to a room, and typically you would have hallways that go down through all these little rooms with the 4 guys, and there would be the heads over there in the middle of the hallway, had the showers and the restrooms and everything. It wasn't like each room had their own restroom, but still, 4 guys to a room, that's not bad after living in boot camp for a couple of months with 80 guys. It was pretty nice in the regular barracks. And also, when I was in school, it was just like a Monday through Friday, sort of a 9 to 5 job type thing. We would muster in the morning outside of the barracks, march over to the school, and this particular school for the basic electricity and electronics was self-paced. So you just had these workbooks that you would go through, because you got to remember, none of this is on computer age. It was workbooks, and then you took these tests that were graded then to see if you could move on. But it was all self-paced. You just had to go along at a reasonable clip, going through your workbooks, doing those studies, and then complete the tests at the end of each sort of chapter. So that school probably took me about 2 or 3 months to complete that, and then I was done with basic electricity. Now, the electronics technician A school, which was the main school, is in Great Lakes. So from Orlando, I flew up to Great Lakes Training Center, which was the one I was saying about in Illinois, where the winters were cold. I spent about a year probably there in Great Lakes. But that was a different type of school. It was still the same setup for the barracks and everything, with the 4 guys to a room and stuff like that. And it was located at a good location because I was probably a block or so from the main chow hall and a block or so from the enlisted club, which made it nice because after school because you only went to school the 8 hours of a day. After that, you were free to study or do whatever you wanted to do. And it was only Monday through Friday, the same as the other school in Florida. So after school, my buddies and I would just go over to the chow hall, get something to eat, head over to the enlisted club, have a couple of beers. There were bands at the enlisted club. They had certainly every weekend, and I think maybe even during the weekdays, they had bands there. That was a pretty good deal too. And you talk about some cheap beer. You didn't have to pay much for a glass of beer back then. So on the base, also, you had all the stuff you really needed, like over at the exchange part of the base where the shopping was done. They had the uniform shops, the barber shops, anything you needed, certainly, you could buy there at the store on the base. And in general, especially back then, the prices of stuff at the Navy base were really competitive with anything on the outside. Like, you could get some decent stuff for really good prices. But since the school was, like I said, Monday through Friday, on the weekends, you generally had to get all your everyday stuff done. So that's when you would do any shopping that you had to get done, get your hair cut. There was a huge laundromat on the base. You could take your stuff over to the laundromat and get all your uniforms ready for the next week and everything else. But like I said, it was probably about a year total in that school at Great Lakes, where it was Monday through Friday. Now, at the end of that A school, when my class graduated, now you're officially an electronics technician, because that was the core training. So all the theory about electricity and electronics, that was really heavy theory. Now I signed up for 6 years so that I would get advanced training in electronics. That meant I would go to what's called a C school. A school was the main school for your trade. C school was more specialized school. So when we graduated from Great Lakes, that's when you got your orders to figure out what ship you're going to be on and what specialized training you were going to end up with. That is how it got decided for me to be on an aircraft carrier, because in the orders when I graduated, it was go to C school in Memphis, Tennessee, for 3 radar systems that are aircraft carrier landing systems. So you're destined for a carrier at that point. So from there, from Great Lakes, I went to Memphis, Tennessee, and I probably spent 4 months or so in Memphis going through specialized radar for carrier landing systems there in Tennessee. Now, since you're already an electronics tech at that point, and it's specialized school, it was 80 or so percent hands on with different test equipment and troubleshooting those particular radar systems, the three that I got assigned for that school. So it was still instructor led, and the instructor would go over the way the radar worked, but most of it was labs, because then he would introduce problems into the radar system where at that point you would use what you've learned with the test equipment, how to troubleshoot those particular problems. So almost all of the testing in those classes was timed troubleshooting. So you guys would leave the room, he would put a problem into it, we would come back in, and whichever of the guy's turn it was to do it, say it was my turn to do the testing, I would troubleshoot the radar system, find out what's wrong, replace the thing that's bad, and have it up and running. And it was all timed. So let's say you had a half an hour to repair this particular piece of the radar. He would start his stopwatch, you would start troubleshooting, and you had to find the problem within that allotted time. Those schools were a lot more fun than sitting 8 hours a day just listening to theory about electron tubes and stuff like that. So then, once I got finished with that school, graduated that from Memphis, it was really like Millington, Tennessee. Now, there I didn't live in a barracks. I got off-base housing for the first time there. And it was like a bit of an old, rundown farm where the farmer guy had some horses and some veggies planted and stuff like that in his fields. But he had a single wide mobile home on his property that he used to have at one point for a relative or something. And he built an additional add-on piece of structure to it. And I lived there with another guy and his wife, and the heating for the place was just one wood-burning stove in the living room, and in the original kitchen of the mobile home part, which was old, it had a sort of a burner mounted on the floor with a little metal cover over it, and it had a tube with holes in it that was hooked to a natural gas line. So there was nothing automated about the heating of this house. And it doesn't, you think of like Memphis, Tennessee as being in the South, Oh, yeah, it's nice and warm down there all the time. No, it gets cold in Memphis, Tennessee. And we were there during the winter, and it got cold. Well, I remember in the mornings, I would get up, and there was no heat during the night. Yeah, you could put some wood in the wood-burning stove, and it would last for a certain amount of time. But it was just like a fireplace with doors, and the wood would burn out, so it would get really cold at night. So I would get up from my bedroom and go into the kitchen area where this gas burner thing was, turn on the gas valve and light it with my lighter, and it would go whoosh, and the flames would come up, and that's how we would start heating up the house. Then get the fireplace going, then it wasn't too bad, because during the day, you would just keep putting wood on the fireplace. Not bad at all. But it definitely got cold in the wintertime in Tennessee. So, eventually, I got done with these classes for sea school. Now it was time to get to the ship. Now, I knew the ship was stationed in Norfolk, Virginia. But yet, I got the orders and it said report to California. So I kind of questioned that, and I talked to some of the people, and I'm like, my ship's in Norfolk. Why am I going to California? Well, they explained it that my ship was out at sea. They were going to fly me out to meet the ship. Okay, makes sense to me, fine. So, after that school, I went on leave, which is like vacation, You get 30 days of leave or whatever per year when you're in the military. So, I went back to my home state in Pennsylvania, stayed for a week or so there, and then I flew out to Great Lakes, Illinois, to meet up with some chick that I met in Great Lakes. Drove with her to Florida because she was going to Florida. And then when I got to Florida, I flew to California. Right around San Francisco. Because I remember while I was there for a couple of weeks, probably for 3 weeks I was there. And one weekend I went over to see Alcatraz. And I took a helicopter ride out over Alcatraz, which was a really nice view and stuff. But the little helicopter didn't have doors on it. So there was two of us. There was me and one of my buddies doing this flyover tour. And so I was on this seat here by where the door would be, but it wasn't there. And I remember the helicopter pilot saying, "Oh, make sure you get your seatbelt fastened right," and all that stuff. Okay, fine. Well, when he flew out over Alcatraz, he tilted the helicopter around so we could see good, and there was no door on this thing. And if it wouldn't have been for that seatbelt, I definitely would have been out that door. The way he swung that helicopter around, yeah, we could see real good, but it wasn't real comfortable feeling like, you could be falling out of this helicopter. Be careful, So we got around there. Wonderful tour, though. I mean, he swooped around and did all kinds of angles and stuff where you could really see Alcatraz and sort of imagine how it used to be, because it wasn't functioning back then even, I believe. But anyway, we were there for like 3 weeks, let's say, out in that base around San Francisco. Now remember, I'm still trying to get to my carrier. Okay, so one day I got orders to go to the air base there and fly to Alaska. Okay, fine. I go to the air base. It's a cargo plane. So, like, I'm in the cargo hold or something with luggage stuff that's being transported, like big crates of stuff that are like strapped down. And there was like a mesh net bench along the one side of the plane. Okay. We took off in this archaic sort of plane thing to go to Alaska. All right, fine. We get to Alaska. Didn't stay there. Turned around, refueled from Alaska to Japan. Okay. Got to Japan, refueled again, and went to the Philippines. All right. That was a long flight, to get halfway around the globe. Okay. So I did that. Stayed over in the Philippines for at least one night, and went to a club where I was sitting out there drinking. It was in the outside environment toward evening, and I saw these what looked like large birdhouses. And I'm sitting there drinking, and I'm watching these, and I'm thinking, that must be a pretty large bird that's flying in these birdhouses and stuff. And then I realized, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a rope going across these birdhouses with a monkey scooting across this rope. And that's when I realized they weren't birdhouses, they were monkey houses. Then throughout that whole evening, I was watching these monkeys run around on these ropes in their own little community, doing their own little thing, while we're sitting down here at the bar having a beer and listening to music. Maybe the monkeys like the music too, I'm not sure, but it was different. So then, that was the short stay in the Philippines. From the Philippines, then I flew out to Diego Garcia. That's a whole nother story. Maybe you remember that one. And then from Diego Garcia, I flew, after 4 weeks, I flew to Mauritius. Now, Mauritius was the island that I actually got on my ship after all this time of traveling the whole way around the world. So I flew to Mauritius, got on a John boat, got onto the carrier, and thought, okay, finally, I'm here. The odd part of this whole travel for all of these months was that by the time I got on my ship, 2 weeks later, I was back in Norfolk. So for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, I traveled around the world to get to my ship so that 2 weeks later, I'm back in Norfolk. Whereas I thought to myself, when I was leaving Memphis, Tennessee, why don't I just go to Norfolk and catch this ship when it gets back? No. They needed me on the ship right away. It just so happened it took a couple of months to get around the globe to where I could catch the ship so that I could be on the ship and then 2 weeks later be in Norfolk at the home port. Okay. I never quite understood how that worked. I guess They tried to get me to the ship sooner without all the delay. It just didn't work. Because if you add it up, how many weeks I was in, well, first of all, I took leave for a couple of weeks where I told you I went from Pennsylvania out to Great Lakes, drove to Florida, and then finally got to California. That whole episode alone probably took me 2 or 3 weeks to do that whole route. Then I was a couple of weeks in San Fran, traveled the whole way across Alaska, Japan, and the Philippines to get to Diego Garcia, which I spent 4 weeks there, to get to the ship so that I could be back in Norfolk 2 weeks after getting to the ship. I think they planned on it being a lot faster, but it didn't really happen. But that's the end of that beer. Take care of yourself, and I'll catch you next time. See ya.